This is the story of a woman who lost her father and in the grieving process stumbled onto something horrible. She could have kept it a secret, but instead, she decided to spread a message that inspired millions. Today's story is called The Woman and the War.
Season 1 of The Story features 12 women trailblazers who changed the world. The story is brought to you exclusively by Salesforce, who strives to create workplaces where everyone feels empowered to bring their full, authentic selves to work. And now, onto the story.
As a little girl, her first memories were filled with confusion. It was the 1960s and Vietnam was raging. Susie was just 6 years old when her father's Air Force unit got deployed to Vietnam. The girl's father became overcome by worry, and her mother became distant. Susie was the youngest of 4 children, and her home life became chaotic. There were many sleepless nights, and she wondered why all of this was happening. Why did her father have to leave? Soon, the Vietnam War permeated all aspects of the culture. Her mother tried to shield her, but the media was relentless. The little girl would watch cartoons, and when they ended, footage of dead American soldiers in the jungles filled the screen. Years passed, and her father returned. The time apart, the fear she felt worrying about him, and the images on TV would never leave her mind. Her father had earned the Distinguished Flying Service Cross and a Bronze Star, but it didn't seem like a victory. Her father had returned in body, but his mind would never be the same. He suffered from nightmares, and she would wake up in the middle of the night to his screams. Soon after he got back, the family moved to Belgium. Susie dreamed of seeing fairy tale castles, but instead, her father showed her battlefields. He showed her where arrows were fired from slits in the castle walls. They visited places where her grandfather was gassed in World War I and where her uncle was injured in World War II. Her father told and retold the tales of how millions of people lost their lives. He would tell her stories of his childhood, of poverty in the Great Depression, and when his family had to hunt for food just to survive. The family traveled all over Europe, and her father showed her the Roman Colosseum and taught her about the gladiators. He even taught her about how the Roman rulers would distract their citizens with panem et circenses, the Latin phrase for bread and circuses, while the rulers waged war. He taught her about the Greek myth of Thusis and the Minotaur. The myth told how the city and the people of Athens would be punished by the rulers. In the myth, the rulers would send 14 children to Crete, where they were thrown into the labyrinth and devoured and had to fight the monstrous Minotaur. Susie took it all in and was transfixed. She couldn't believe the terrible things that human beings were capable of doing to each other. She never resented her father for his lengthy and often violent stories or for opening her eyes to the world. Susie continued to grow up, and like everyone else affected by Vietnam, she did her best to put it behind her. She turned her focus towards college, where she earned a bachelor's degree in theater arts and then a master's degree in writing. She worked odd jobs before she caught a break at age 29. Then, she landed a job writing for Nickelodeon TV shows. Although she was only 29, she had far more life experience than the average television writer. She became prolific. She churned out scripts for shows like Clarissa Explains It All, The Mystery Files of Shelby Woo, and Clifford the Dog. Susie had turned her passion for writing into a great job. At this point, it would be easy for almost anybody to get comfortable, and she did. A decade of hard work passed. Meanwhile, with each stroke of Susie's pen, she was drawing closer and closer to turning her own childhood revelations into a story that would resonate around the world. At age 40, Susie took the leap and wrote her own book. It was called Gregor the Overlander. It debuted the following year and sold enough copies for her publisher to order the next book in the series. The series was a modest hit, and for the next 5 years, her publisher kept ordering new books in the series. By the time Susie turned 45, she was burned out from writing the same series. She called it quits. The series had sold well, and it had even become a New York Times bestseller, but she didn't feel complete. She was a wife and mother of 2 children, and she knew she needed to find a new story to write, but it was hard to find the time. There wasn't that one big idea pulling her forward. One late night, in a daze, she was flipping through the TV channels. Reality television was on one channel, and footage of the Iraq War was on the next. In this light, she caught a glimpse of what the media had become. It was one big reality show. To the media, war was just another channel. It was just one more reality show that they covered, and no one dared to present a concrete plan on how to end it. She was no longer watching a reality show. The war was real to her, and the fact that millions of other people treated it like just a reality show That was deeply disturbing to her. When she tried to talk to people about it, she discovered that most people thought wars were something mandatory or inevitable. They treated it like a topic they weren't allowed to talk about, and that sent chills up her spine. She knew what it felt like to be a girl and have her father's number called. She knew it was even more real for the men and women who were trapped in the combat. Susie looked back and remembered how powerless she felt as a child. Then she had to watch the madness, but now something was different. She was no longer powerless. She had friends, connections, and savings earned through her hard work. She had her pen, and she had immense skills that she had developed over decades of honing her craft. And most importantly, now she had the big idea for her next book. She didn't just have this new idea, it had her. And in a culture obsessed with watching reality TV or violent shows, the time was right to tell it. At 46 years old, she decided to do something about the evil she saw in the world. She put pen to paper and wrote her story. All of the stories her father taught her were now bubbling to the surface of her mind. She included all of them. The death, people being gassed, arrows, bombs. She told a story of a girl who lost her father, whose family had to forage for food. It was a lot like the stories her father told her family. It was a story about war. The twist was that she wrote the book for young adults. The former Nickelodeon TV writer, who used to write episodes of Clarissa Explains It All, was now presenting war to kids. She even named the government in her story Panem, after her father's lessons about the Roman rulers. Her main characters had to fight and kill in a war they were forced into. And afterwards, they had to learn how to live with the consequences. They would wake up in the middle of the night screaming, something that she knew all too well. After the book was published, a small release and launch followed. Then, the book caught fire. 14 months after her first book in the series debuted, there were 1.5 million copies in circulation. The film rights were sold. A sequel followed, and then it became a trilogy. Then movies started rolling out, and a larger audience loved them. Susie is, of course, Suzanne Collins. Suzanne Collins has now sold over 87 million books. The Hunger Games has become a massive global phenomenon. With such a reach, it's astonishing that the trilogy's message and its impact on culture is rarely discussed. Suzanne Collins put a radical message into the Hunger Games trilogy. It requires a huge amount of courage to present or even discuss an accurate view of war. The truth about war goes against almost every taboo of our culture, government, and media. Suzanne's story is a stark contrast to others in modern-day pop culture and movies. Most modern artists choose to glorify war without presenting the whole truth. It never ends well. So what type of questions and debate was she trying to spark? Suzanne's own words are illuminating. She says, "We have so much programming coming at us all the time. Is it too much? Are we becoming desensitized to the entire experience? I can't believe a certain amount of that isn't happening." She goes on to say that if there's a real-life tragedy unfolding, you should not be thinking of yourself as an audience member, because those are real people on the screen, and they're not going away when the commercials start to roll. That was Suzanne Collins commenting on the real message inside her book, The Hunger Games. At least in reality shows, the audience has a chance to develop empathy for the characters. Suzanne would point out that most of our media treats war like a reality show, but doesn't even consider the basics of creating empathy with the people involved. Instead, the audience is trained to view the cast as people who are just doing their duty. Suzanne's trilogy boldly shows us how most people in the world, or Panem, view war. It's something that every once in a while, they just end up watching on TV. Suzanne Collins is one of the first authors to create a story with widespread popular appeal that doesn't have a happy ending. There is no glorified message about war, and for good reason. War is almost never justified. Her stories force us to ask a question. Will we continue to accept the same boring sacrificial altar that is war? Will people continue to remain silent while young people die? Or will we demand that our politicians learn to negotiate peacefully? The Hunger Games is a trilogy that is an example of a creative genius hiding philosophy inside a story. Suzanne used the right amount of war glorification to introduce the series, but then she took a radical deviation once the reader was inside. There was a good chance that The Hunger Games wouldn't be a commercial success. After all, there are very few people who are brave enough to seriously critique their culture. But luckily for us, Suzanne Collins is such a masterful storyteller that her talent drove the series' massive commercial success. With her approach to an already touchy subject, Collins could have offended someone at the publishing company. She could have been blacklisted by the entertainment industry. A wise person once said that thinkers are not a welcome addition to most social situations. Anyone who goes just an inch deep into the Hunger Games will find that it's written by a thinker. Moreover, it's brimming with ideas that will spark new ideas in the reader. Ideas that make people think too much are usually the first to be killed. In our modern day and age, many people are terrified of speaking honestly about their beliefs for fear of losing their jobs or facing social stigmas and isolation. Suzanne Collins' victory proves that wonderful things can happen when you're bold enough to speak the truth. She took everything that life threw at her, the separation from her father she faced as a young girl, the problems that it created in her family, the uncertainty she felt wondering if her father would live or die. She took all of that and ensouled her story with it. Herein lies the magic of the Hunger Games and what the love between a father and daughter can create. As children, we might not have the power required to stop violence, but as adults, with skills, resources, and empathy, we possess the power required to help free those we care about. We can save people from society's sacrificial altars. We don't have to spend our lives on the sidelines. We can build up our own expertise, become powerful, and prove, once and for all, that the pen can be mightier than the sword. That's her story. What's yours going to be?
Thank you for listening to The Story. As a thank you, we have an exclusive giveaway for listeners of The Story, a chance to win one of 10 free tickets to Dreamforce, courtesy of our presenting sponsor, Salesforce. Salesforce is committed to supporting trailblazers like you. If you don't know Dreamforce, you are in for a treat. Dreamforce brings together thought leaders, industry pioneers, and customers for 4 high-energy days of learning, inspiration, equality, fun, and incredible concerts. You can head to thestorypodcast.com and enter to win today. That is thestorypodcast.com. Thank you again to our presenting sponsor, Salesforce, for helping promote equal opportunity and sharing these stories of trailblazers.
If you like this episode of The Story, please help spread these stories by telling one friend. Also, you can hit the subscribe button on iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. The Story is created by our team here at The Mission. The Mission is your #1 source for accelerated learning. To get more stories and podcasts like this and our world-class newsletter, subscribe at themission.co. That's themission.co. See you next time.